A very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. It's with enormous pleasure that I welcome here today Ambassador Sarwar Naqvi, very, very senior Pakistani colleague. He's the Executive Director of the Center for International Strategic Studies, and he has been Ambassador of Pakistan. His CV is on the flip side of the paper that's given you. He has enormous experience in diplomacy, and he has continued to serve his country in a different way. I mean, diplomats neither die nor fade away. They continue to be around, as you can see from your sincerely as well. So, he will speak to the situation in, he'll speak to actually Pakistan's foreign policy current issues. You can see the title itself dichotomizes the theme. In other words, Pakistan's foreign policy is always there, but the current issues is also something that has grabbed the attention of all Pakistan watchers and those who are interested academically in the interesting evolving situation in Pakistan, a country which many feel are at crossroads in some ways. It has, to its credit, completed the second term of its parliament. It has installed a new government which is a caretaker government, which is charged with holding the elections. It's a system that initially was borrowed from Bangladesh, but Pakistan, to its credit, has sharpened and honed that institution in a way that it has become an effective tool of a peaceful transfer of power from one government to another. Perhaps someday will come when this process will be redundant and the democratic process will be so sophisticated as to effect its own transfers through mechanisms in which public representatives are involved. Without further ado, I will give you the floor, Sarwar, for 30 minutes or so, and thereafter I'll open the floor to questions and answers. And in this audience, I also recognize Begum Naqvi. Welcome, Madam, and the High Commissioners of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope this is Ifti. It's a great pleasure to be here, and we go back a long time, and you have had the distinct privilege of having been from in the Pakistan Foreign Service, as well as subsequently in the Bangladesh Foreign Service, a veteran diplomat, and I feel highly honored and privileged to have you be my interlocutor. I am also greatly pleased to be here at the Institute for South Asian Studies of the National University of Singapore, and it's very impressive. We've been driving inside, and we found this very impressive institution with so many buildings and so many departments spread all over the sprawling campus. And I myself come to Singapore for the Shangri-La dialogue, and so we decided that we'll request Ambassador Nasrullah Khan, who is our ambassador here, was instrumental in organizing this event. CISS, which I represent, and I am the founding executive director, is a independent think tank in Islamabad, and we do a lot of research reports. We do events, seminars, workshops, conferences. We do fellowship programs, and we have been in existence now for more than 8 years. We are into our 9th year. We started in 2010. So I see this as also establishing a link between the ISAS and the CISS. Now, about the topic, Pakistan's foreign policy current issues, which I had proposed that I would speak on, is something that I'll go into. But I recall, Ifti, that you said something about talking about the internal situation a little bit.
Yeah.
So do you want me to do that right now?
You could. I mean, it could flow from the domestic situation to foreign affairs. I mean,
Right. Exactly. So I'll do that quickly for 5 minutes and then move on to the foreign policy bit. The internal situation, it disappoints me to see how poorly Pakistan is presented in the outside world. Pakistan is actually developing its democratic institutions rather impressively, if I may say. We have the strengthening of the institutions, which means the judiciary is very strong now, and no government can expect to sort of influence the judiciary to do things in their way, according to their wishes. And accompanying institutions like the National Accountability Bureau, NAB, and the governmental institutions, FIA, and the provincial governments, small bodies, they all are working with the judiciary. Parliament is very strong now, because we have parliamentary standing committees, which we didn't have before. And these standing committees are determining policy. They are making impact on the government's functioning. I will just cite that the parliament decided that we will not send troops to Yemen. And this was a major decision. And the government was obliged to follow that decision and has stuck to it even today. Now, new elections are due on the 25th of July. The Election Commission of Pakistan has come into its own and is doing it very well. So, things are actually moving in the right direction. And this is very impressive, because we have had a checkered history of military rule, military intervention, and these things are becoming less and less likely. One can't say that it's not going to happen, but it's much less likely. And this is what is called an evolution. It's evolving. Protection of minorities, I want to point out. Last week, the Archbishop of Karachi has been appointed a cardinal by the Pope. So, we have a cardinal in the conclave of the Vatican. So this is respecting our Christian minority, and it is a very big step. Once before, many years ago, we had an archbishop elevated to cardinalship, but this is after a long time. Then, action against extremism and militancy. The military operations are going on very effectively, and we are doing a lot. What used to be, frequent terrorist attacks all over the city, all over the country, and in all the cities, have become occasional incidents. We are taking action against money laundering under the Financial Action Task Force requirements. Money that goes into terrorism and supporting militancy and all kinds of radical movements. So, there is the National Action Plan, which is the framework under which all this is doing. The economy is doing well. Growth rate is over 6%, as recently given out in the economic survey of the government. Now, the domestic and external debt are high. That is true. But this is not bad per se. I am not an economist. Mr. Yasin, my good friend who has joined us, is is one. But this is, I'm told, a feature of a growing economy that you are into debt. If you are doing things, you will incur debt. But it's relinquishing the debt, diminishing the debt, that is important. And that is what we have to work for. Then, finally, the CPEC. This is my entire survey of the domestic situation. Under CPEC, we have three things happening: infrastructure development, energy projects, and greater connectivity with neighboring countries.
This is China-Pakistan Economic
The
Corridor.
CPEC, yes, sorry, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is the flagship project of the Belt and Road Initiative of China. And this is a big project. So anyway, I think, contrary to all the very gloomy prognostications of the Pakistani situation and of Pakistan, things are actually moving quite well. I don't want to say that everything is hunky-dory, but things are quite good as they look like just now. Now, foreign policy. Pakistan's foreign policy is a function of all the other factors, which the interplay of regional and global politics shapes the foreign policy of a state. Pakistan's position in the world in terms of its geography, geopolitical position, military strength, economic position, and relations with other states are some of the elements that determine how it is seen in the world, as well as being affected by any transformations at the regional and global level. It is important to see how Pakistan's relationship with the US, a global power, and China, an economic powerhouse, is shaping up. There are some changing trends in the international system which directly affect Pakistan. A growing Indo-US relationship, the evolving situation in Afghanistan, and the evolving US-China and US-Russia relationships all directly affect and indirectly impact on how Pakistan pursues its foreign policy. Pakistan's foreign policy ran into a cataclysmic development right at the turn of the century. So, in 2001, the 9/11 attack has actually affected Pakistan's foreign policy to an extent that it continues even today. You see, it was followed by the US-led military attack in Afghanistan and resulted in the summary removal of the Taliban government. Due to the porous border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban remnants fled to Pakistan's tribal areas. In the Bonn conference held thereafter, in a bid to establish a friendly government in Afghanistan, the US ignored the southern Pashtun populace while the Northern Alliance became the major shareholder in the Karzai administration. It alienated southern Pashtuns, who became an easy recruitment pool for the Taliban. After installing a nominal political setup in Kabul, the US sidelined Afghanistan and diverted its focus on the Iraq war. This vacuum caused Afghan Taliban resurgence and their launching of counterinsurgency against foreign troops and foreign-backed Kabul government and its military forces. Later, the recurrent US pronouncements of withdrawal from Afghanistan further led to the wait-and-see policy on the part of the Taliban and the regional stakeholders. President Donald Trump has also criticized this approach by the previous administrations of giving a deadline of when they will leave, and holds this as partly the reason for the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan. Two things I must say before I go on is that the text is available, so I'll leave it here. And secondly, you see, I will just focus on certain areas and then we can have further discussion. With Afghan Taliban slipping into Pakistan's tribal belt through the porous border, the security situation in Pakistan was further aggravated by sectarian, ethnic, and separatist movements within Pakistan, especially in Karachi and Balochistan. Exploiting Pakistan's lead role in the US-led war on terror, the Taliban incited the local tribesmen against the Pakistani government and military. The self-proclaimed Mujahideen started suicide attacks against civilians, security forces, and the government. It is important to note that before 9/11, there was only one recorded suicide attack in Pakistan's territory. But post 9/11, hundreds of such attacks started taking place. The Pakistani nation has had to sacrifice the lives of more than 70,000 security personnel and civilians so far. The US might have had one 9/11, but Pakistan has had many, dozens, hundreds. A full-blown insurgency emerged in the formerly princely state of Swat. Pakistan's response to the terrorist attacks and the Swat insurgency came in the form of military operations such as the operations in South Waziristan, Khyber, and other tribal agencies. The Swat operation, which dislodged the so-called government established there. The Zarb-e-Azm and the more recent Raddul Fasad, which have largely eradicated the menace of terrorism from Pakistan. So, the impression that the government of Pakistan is sitting there and instigating terrorists to do things, this is a very erroneous picture. We are the victims of the developments in the region and policies that have been followed by external powers. On the economic side, the losses are estimated at over $127 billion. This includes the cost of hosting Afghan refugees in Pakistan, which since they have reduced from 5 million to 1.5 million in 2018, are still a sizable number. While Pakistan believes it is holding its end of the bargain by pursuing an end to terrorism, the US is blaming Pakistan for its mistakes and losses, thus undermining Pakistan's role in the global war on terror as well as the sacrifices made by Pakistan in the last 17 years. Despite the meager resources available to Pakistan, it has made significant progress in this regard. Pakistan's success in countering terrorism has been acknowledged in the recent Global Terrorism Index Report 2017, published by the Sydney-based Institute for Economics and Peace. According to this report, Pakistan ranked as 5th out of 163 countries with a score of 8.4 out of 10 on the index, a marked improvement as it ranked 4th in 2007 and declined to a much lower score in later years. This is because Pakistan has successfully destroyed and dismantled terrorist networks from its territory. Pakistan insists and wants the United States to provide evidence and information about the alleged presence of terrorists inside Pakistan. It would take necessary military action against them. On the other hand, it can be seen that the US failed to achieve its own objectives in Afghanistan despite its military and technological prowess. Terrorism in Afghanistan has not been eliminated, nor has extremism been contained. Afghanistan is still destabilized after 17 years of ISAF presence and for more than 15 years of more than 100,000 troops in that territory. What have these people done? I mean, what were they doing for all these years? Did not combat terrorism, did not control poppy cultivation, which creates the drug menace, and they just sat there getting stuff from the commissaries and doing their routine duties in the morning of patrolling and continuing till the evening. This is not dealing with a military situation. Drug and opium production has in fact increased in Afghanistan, feeding and financing the Afghan Taliban. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, where I represented Pakistan when I was in Vienna, in a report in 2001, there were 8,000 hectares of opium cultivation. In 2014, they have become 224,000, with an increase of 28 times of the expanse of land under poppy cultivation. In addition, a growing presence now of the ISIS in Afghanistan, despite ISAF forces on the ground, is another worrying development. Pakistan believes that a long-term and durable solution to the Afghanistan problem can be achieved through diplomatic negotiations among all regional stakeholders. Pakistan also believes that political reconciliation with Afghan Taliban, to include them in the power sharing arrangement, is an integral part of bringing peace to Afghanistan. Then, Pakistan believes that border management is extremely important in controlling a movement of terrorists across from one side to another. In 2016, Pakistan built 43 border posts, and more work has since been underway to construct an additional 338 border posts and forts for surveillance and security on its side of the border. On the Afghan side of the border, similar border posts must be established. This should be undertaken by the coalition forces in Afghanistan. U.S. emphasis on border security requires an active border control and management on its part, because it wants border security, but it doesn't do anything to ensure it. In 2016, Pakistan successfully completed digging an 1,100-kilometer long trench on the Balochistan-Afghan border to prevent illegal immigration and intrusion into Pakistan. This project alone cost Pakistan 14 billion rupees. In 2017, Pakistan unilaterally started building a fence along its 100-kilometer long Pak-Afghan border to address mutual complaints of militant incursions. Now, by the way, another point that comes to my mind right now is that this is not official Pakistani government policy. We are an independent think tank. It is our assessment. It is not what the government, maybe, the ambassador is here. Maybe it varies from some points that the government might wish to make, but I represent a private independent think tank. Pak-US relations. Pakistan's relations with the United States have remained uneven and now quite troubled. From a close bilateral relationship in the first decade of the 21st century, ties between the two states have progressively declined in the second decade. Pakistan and the US were close partners in defeating Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. In appreciation of Pakistan's efforts, the United States granted Pakistan a major non-NATO ally status in 2004. However, after the toppling of the Taliban government in Kabul and Saddam Hussein's government in Baghdad, the US shifted its attention to other matters, including the containing of China, which it sees as an emerging challenge to the US role in the Asia-Pacific region. To achieve its objective of containing the rise of China, the US envisaged for India a role of, quote, net security provider, unquote, in the region. After the Indo-US nuclear deal in 2005 and the Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement of 2015, there is a clear convergence of goals of the two states in the Asia-Pacific region. The US-India strategic partnership subsequently led to change in US policy vis-à-vis Pakistan, as it supported India's larger role in Afghanistan to contain China. At the same time, the US has continued to level allegations on Pakistan in terms of its alleged support to the Afghan Taliban and Haqqani network and their sanctuaries inside Pakistan's territory. The United States' use of diplomatic compellence to pressurize Pakistan has led it to accept the Indian stance on terrorism and has thus designated Kashmir-focused groups in Pakistan as terrorists, placing Pakistan on the grey list in the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, in the list of countries that finance terrorists. The US is in fact maximizing pressure on Pakistan to do more against terrorism. President Donald Trump's America First policy is in fact reflective of his impulsive approach to foreign policy, where he believes that the US being unfairly being taken advantage of by others. his tweet of lies and deceits on part of Pakistan may be seen in that perspective. At least we see it in that perspective. The current issues of contention between two countries include U.S. allegation of Pakistan's support to Afghanistan and providing them sanctuaries inside its territory, allegations of duplicity and support of cross-border terrorism in Afghanistan, projecting Pakistan's nuclear program as risky and unsafe, with the new U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton declaring with the risk of Pakistan becoming a terrorist nuclear country similar to Iran or North Korea on steroids, he said. Pakistan, however, believes that the Afghanistan conundrum is in fact a consequence of American flawed policies and rejects such ill-informed statements by U.S. officials. Perennial problems between India and Pakistan. Problems between India and Pakistan have historical roots going back to the partition of the subcontinent. The mindset shaped in those early years determined much of the contours of Pakistan's foreign policy towards India. Pakistan's security concerns were further aggravated by India's overt military collusion with Bengali rebel forces, causing the breakup of Pakistan in 1971 and its nuclear tests in 1974. These events, most important of all, created a perception in Pakistan that it cannot protect its territorial integrity and sovereignty through its conventional military power alone. Hence, Pakistan initiated a program to explore the option of building a nuclear weapon. This is the way we look at it. In a word about Bangladesh, I mean, the Bangladesh aspiration for independence was the aspiration of the people for their legitimate rights. And we see it like that. But Modi himself said in Dhaka that he had helped the Mukti Bahini in its actions against Pakistani army. And this was 2 years ago when Modi was visiting Dhaka. So I have alluded to that, and we can talk about it. We don't want to at all, cast any aspersions, but we are just stating how things look. Now, we explored the nuclear weapons possibility, and it finally resulted in the overt nuclearization of India and Pakistan in 1998. Then I talk about post 9/11 scenario. Bilateral relations between India and Pakistan are not only impacted by their checkered history, but also by significant global, regional geostrategic transformations that affect their foreign policies in general and also towards each other in particular. In the rapidly changing geostrategic dynamics in the post 9/11 period, the United States considered India, in the U.S. envoy to India, Kenneth Juster's words, as the net provider of security and stability in South Asia. The Obama administration's $10 billion deal with India in 2010 elevated their bilateral strategic cooperation to new heights. President Obama declared it as the defining partnership of the 21st century. In June 2016, the U.S. Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, for the FY17, financial year 17, which recognized India as a major defense partner. As a result, India's trade, as a result of the defense trade deals, India's trade with the U.S. reached very large figures. Pakistan is concerned at these developments. The foremost concerns of Pakistan with reference to the U.S.-India strategic partnership are as follows. 1. Growing transfer of arms disturbs the balance of power between India and Pakistan. 2. Giving India a larger role in Afghanistan poses serious implications for Pakistan's security with respect to India's use of Afghan soil to foment terrorism inside Pakistan, especially in Balochistan and Karachi. 3. The U.S. overlooks India's human rights violations in Kashmir, which in turn emboldens India to commit itself with its oppressive policies in the Kashmir Valley. 4. Pakistan has a special concern regarding net security provider role given to India in the purview of India's much-wanted threats of surgical strikes under the rubric of the Cold Start Doctrine and its destabilizing activities in Pakistan through the state agents. The confession of the raw agent Kulbhushan Yadav, a serving naval commander, is a case in point. Then I talk about Kashmir, and I don't want to go too much into it, but I'll just say that the use of pellet guns has blinded and disabled many Kashmiris, which is now being resorted to by the Indian security forces. The recent rape and murder case of an 8-year-old girl, Asifa, by Indian security forces revealed it demonstrably. There are two parts to the Kashmir dispute. Now, this is very important, and this is what I am saying. One is the bilateral dispute between India and Pakistan. The other is the grave and wholesale human rights violations of the Muslim community in Kashmir. While the world may leave the first to be dealt with bilaterally, this is an issue that can be dealt with bilaterally. That's what India wants. It must stop the virtual genocide of the people of Kashmir. India has refused to engage in dialogue with Pakistan on the pretext of Pakistan's alleged sponsorship of terrorism in India. India has been using the 10-year-old 2008 Mumbai terrorist attacks to project Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism. Its allegations against Pakistan have been contradicted by many sources, including a recent look on the subject written by a recent book which I am trying to recall the name, Elias something.
This is where is the author from?
From the United States.
United States. Does anyone recall?
I'll look it up.
Okay.
It's about Kashmir. White House rejected petitions, and for that, on the basis of that book, the White House has recently rejected the petitions to declare Pakistan a state sponsor of terror. Putting terrorism on top of a dialogue process agenda would not solve any problem. India must understand that terrorism, in essence, stems from India's state operation in Kashmir, which in turn acts as a breeding ground for Mujahideen against the Indian state. The Kashmiri freedom struggle is an indigenous one. Pakistan supports the cause morally, politically, and diplomatically. For Pakistan, it is not only a territorial dispute and an unfinished agenda of the partition, it is also a human rights issue, similar to the Palestinian issue. And let me add that Pakistan's interest is based also on the fact that in Kashmir, of the people, interest in the people of Kashmir, that a large population of our present-day Punjab has Kashmiri migrants and refugees from the Srinagar Valley. Even Nawaz Sharif is a Kashmiri. And there are so many others who are Kashmiris. Thousands of civil servants are Kashmiris. So the interest is genuine, serious, and we will be concerned about the people of Kashmir. And that cannot be stopped by any government in Pakistan. Other outstanding issues within Pakistan and India include the territorial issues of Siachen and Sikrik and water sharing disputes, as India has repeatedly threatened to stop the flow of water to Pakistan, violating the Indus Water Treaty. With respect to the recent construction of the dam on Kishan-Ganga River in Kashmir, Pakistan has raised objections to the height of the dam and its capacity to hold water, as it would disrupt the flow of water to Pakistan. So far, water talks have failed to produce any result due to India's insistence on assigning an international expert, not a court of arbitration, for dispute resolution mechanism. For the solution of short-term, medium-term, and long-ranging disputes, Pakistan has asked India, as a starting point, to hold bilateral dialogue. The talks offer has been rejected time and again by Indian government over its insistence on resolving cross-border terrorism. Pakistan's main purpose of holding talks would be to normalize its relations with India. The foremost step would be to reap low-hanging fruits, to pluck the low-hanging fruits is a better metaphor. Pakistan and India's recent agreement to reinforce the 2003 ceasefire on LOC is a good start. Other stepping stones towards diffusing tensions, because there was a recent telephone call between the Director General Military Operations of the two countries, reinforcing the 2003 ceasefire accord. And the other stepping stones towards diffusing tensions would be resumption of bilateral sports exchange of artists, increasing people-to-people contact, and easing of visa facilities. These steps would markedly lead towards preparing a ground for dealing with more difficult and larger issues like Kashmir and terrorism. I think I am running out of time now. Yeah?
Well, take another 5 minutes or so to wrap up.
I'll talk about China and Russia now.
Okay.
In the current geopolitical and geo-economic situation, Pakistan is fortunate to be at the crossroads where it can benefit from China's rise in both these areas. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is the flagship project in China's Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road, which may bring upon Pakistan immense opportunities. With an investment and loan facility being afforded to Pakistan in China in the form of CPEC projects, it can bring in opportunities for economic growth and internal economic consolidation in the long run. There is an immense opportunity for Pakistani traders, farmers, and industrialists to use this upcoming avenue to reach out to new and diverse markets, especially under the SEZ, which is the Special Economic Zones provided for under the CPEC. At the government level, the trade route can be used to boost economic relations with Central Asian, African, and European states, as Pakistan provides the shortest route to China to reach Europe and Africa. By making Pakistan an economic hub, the country's image can be changed from a hardliner extremist state to one of a growing, developing economic hub. As the project materializes and progresses, it will make Pakistan an attractive investment destination. Russia's warming up to Pakistan has to be figured in both as a success story for Pakistan as well as an appreciation of the evolving geopolitical alliances in the region. In 2014, Russia lifted its arms embargo on Pakistan, which is a landmark event in the relations between the Cold War adversaries. Opening up a consulate in Peshawar, Russia's military exercises with Pakistan, army inside Pakistan, and a visit to North and South Waziristan by the Defense Minister of Russia signify the beginning of a new era of friendship. On the economic side, Russia has shown interest in improving economic ties with Pakistan. The agreement for North-South gas pipeline worth $10 billion was signed in 2017. With regard to foreign policy, Russia abstained from naming Pakistan at the BRICS summit in India and defended Pakistan against the Trump strategy in South Asia. It supported Pakistan's membership of the SCO in 2015, and Russia has also said that it is not opposed to Pakistan joining the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which provides Pakistan with yet another international supporter in its bid to become the NSG member. I visited Moscow in April to attend the Moscow Conference on International Security, MCIS, and I established contact with 3 Russian think tanks, which we are now working on cooperation between us. Pakistan's foreign policy, concluding remarks. Pakistan's foreign policy is currently going through a change owing to many internal and external factors. It is a mix of Pakistan's security imperatives, national objectives, and international commitments. Similarly, simultaneously, Pakistan's foreign policy is impacted by the evolving regional and international geostrategic environment. As any country in a global integrated system, Pakistan's foreign policy cannot function without taking into account what is happening around it. It is important to appreciate Pakistan's status as a mid-range power with limited resources, as we see ourselves. Similarly, Pakistan's internal situation and its role in the war on terror has been a major factor in Pakistan's internal as well as external policies. The list of internal and external challenges being faced by Pakistan are numerous. The internal destabilization inside Pakistan and has to be checked. Pakistan has actively advocated its case regarding the matter of non-state actors, and the indifferent response by the US only adds to Pakistan's problem. Similarly, Indo-Afghan relations aimed at sidelining Pakistan also do not serve Pakistan's interest. Pakistan has played a positive role in the reconstruction process of Afghanistan and has provided land and sea routes to the US military to combat insurgent groups over the years. Moreover, despite Pakistan's role in peace-building efforts through facilitating talks with Taliban in the past in Afghanistan, both Afghanistan and the US ignore Pakistan's sacrifices and efforts. The negative statements by American NSA regarding Pakistan's nuclear program are also unwarranted. Without understanding Pakistan's political culture or giving due credit to the multi-layered security infrastructure and procedures put in place to protect Pakistan's nuclear assets, such statements emanating from the US only undermine Pakistan's decades-long effort to secure its nuclear program. Irresponsible rhetoric also appearing in President Trump's South Asian policy does not take into account the fact that Pakistan is a country of 220 million peaceful people with a robust army and a democratically elected political government in place. It is important that the US understands that strategic stability in South Asia needs to be maintained, and negative comments on Pakistan results weakening it and causing the problem for the whole region to further aggravate. Ladies and gentlemen, I've given you a perspective on Pakistan's foreign policy, beginning with a small sort of roundup of what's happening inside Pakistan, which can be critically assessed by some of the people assembled here. I mean, this is something that I would expect, and I would look forward to further elaboration of my thoughts in the interactive session. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarwar. On this month of Ramadan, you have given us enough food, but for thought only. You've divided, of course, your pitch into 5 segments: domestic, then Pakistan, US, Pakistan, India, Pakistan, China, Pakistan, Russia. Perhaps in the pecking order in which many of us would view Pakistan's external relations. Obviously, it doesn't cover entirety of how Pakistan relates to the world. Beyond the huge segment of Pakistan's external relations are focused on the Middle East, or what we call the Middle East, multilateral institutions to which you yourself was Pakistan's representative. But anyway, everyone can't do everything at the same time. Many thanks for leaving your notes behind, and we will make, hopefully our scholars will make good use of it thereafter. I now open the floor to question answer. You're very right to say that what you have said may be critiqued, and that was the idea of this seminar, or any seminar for that matter. So the Socratic process is now on.
Yes.
I will recognize Anish first, but rest of you can start thinking about what to ask.
Yes. Firstly, I would like to thank Your Excellency for coming here and giving us this talk. My first question is about Pakistan relations with the United States. If you look at the United States, the reason why Pakistan has this relation with the US, one thing you have to look at is the influence of lobby groups in the United States. Particularly, the Indian lobby is very strong, as well as the US military lobby, the influence of think tanks, like broking institutes and all that. I have seen US Congressional Foreign Relations Committee, where you have people like Ted Poe and Dana Rohrabacher. They sit on a Capitol Hill and they speak about the disintegration of Pakistan, about Sindh and Balochistan succeeding from Pakistan. I mean, imagine in Pakistan if succeeding, breaking up from Pakistan. Yes, and in Pakistan we can't talk about California or Texas leaving the United States. I mean, they would view it another way. So the point I want to make is that partly the reason why I blame Pakistan for the relations it has with the United States is that it's not countering these lobby groups. What I would like your opinion on this. Do you think that Pakistan has to use some funds, hire a very good US lobbying firm, a lobbying company to actually project your narrative in the United States? There's a lot of money needed, a lot of investment. You got to invest in newspaper advertisements. You got to control the narrative that is going on. To speak to individual congressmen. Pakistan also has to use its diaspora in United States. The next point is about Pakistan's role in the Muslim Ummah. The thing is that if you look at the Middle East, Pakistan then is now caught in balancing its relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. If you look at the GCC, Pakistan has good relations with all GCC countries on bilateral terms, and I mean now the GCC it's in a mess. At the start of your speech, you very rightly mentioned that about Pakistan staying out of the Yemen war. I think that's a very good decision that Pakistan made, because the Yemen war is viewed as a proxy war between Saudi and Iran, and Pakistan maintains its neutrality. But the thing is that there's also this view that the military in Pakistan is more pro Saudi Arabia, and there's a balancing issue there. Now, the very last point I'll make is that you were formerly the High Commissioner in London, if I'm not wrong. You were posted in London.
I was posted in London, but not High Commissioner.
Okay, maybe you could tell us what is the government of Pakistan doing with the British government to actually put Altaf Hussain in jail? Because how he harms Pakistan. So I was quite interested on that point as well. Thank you.
Okay, three important questions raised here. Would you like to take them first? Of course, I did mention the fact that you couldn't cover everything and left out the Ummah and the Middle East, etc.
Right.
But that's a very important point, because much of the challenge facing Pakistan's foreign policy establishment is how to steer the thing between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So how would you react to the 3 points?
Okay. I served 5 years in Washington as Deputy Chief of Mission from 91 to 95. 96. So I know Washington beltway, inside the beltway environment extremely well. And that I share with Mr. Raja Mohan, because he was there when I was there, and I know him from that time. Yes, hiring of lobbyists and things like that, it's much more than that. You see, I have been in diplomacy for 40 years. And I retired after 40 years of serving all over the world. It's not always just the lobbyists. If that was so easy, then things would be very different. That you pay some money and hire some guys and they start propagating your position, and then that's the world accepts it, that government accepts it. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that, my friend. It is also a factor of geopolitics. I say geopolitics is much messier than domestic politics. Though the domestic politics in each country is very bad, but geopolitics is even worse, as my friend Iftekhar Chowdhury would know. So it is a factor of geopolitics. It does not suit the United States at this moment to be friendly with Pakistan, and that is something we accept, and I'll leave it at that. Role of Muslim Ummah. You see, yes, the people of Pakistan have very strong sentiments for the Muslim Ummah because we happen to be Muslims, but the internal disputes of Pakistan, of the Muslim countries, does not concern Pakistan. We always remain neutral. Like in the Iran-Iraq war. In the Iran-Iraq war, we took no sides. And we were, just a minute, hear me out. I accompanied General Ziaul Haq many times on trips to Iran as well as Iraq in those days. And we tried to mediate between the two countries to the extent we could. It didn't end, it lasted 8 years. But that is an example that of the policy that we have, that we don't interfere in inter-Muslim disputes. Now, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, we have reasonably good relations with Iran, and we have fairly close relations with Saudi Arabia. But the Iranians understand our position, and so do the Saudis. The Saudis know that we cannot cut off from Iran, and we cannot be hostile to Iran. The Saudis know that. So, there is no clash of interest. The military, this is just a speculation that the military is more pro-Saudi. Who knows? I mean, how can you say that? So, that is just speculative. So, I will not go into that. Next, Altaf Hussain in jail. You see, the political evolution is such that Altaf Hussain stands marginalized. And Pakistan has provided ample proof to the British government many a times. I used to summon the British ambassador when I was additional secretary for Europe in the Foreign Office. And I have told him many a times that he should be extradited to Pakistan. And he said that you don't have an extradition treaty, and that also could be arranged for one special exemption or particular request. So they did not give us, and people in Pakistan say that it was in the interest of the British government. They always harbor troublemakers in different countries who live in London, who live in the UK, and who create problems in their home countries. They have done this in a number of cases, and we are not very, very convinced of the impartiality and neutrality of the British government. And that's an honest opinion I am giving you. And I am doing it on the basis of my diplomatic dealings and experiences, which is not to reflect on that is their way of doing things, so let them do it. Altaf Hussain would be put in jail if he is brought to Pakistan. Why the British don't do it, it's their business. We can't force them to do it.
Okay, of course you do understand that Anisha's critique was what we call a sympathetic critique. I mean, he may have appeared to sound critical, but it was sympathetic. Very quickly, 30 seconds.
Pakistan always remaining neutral when there's disputes between Muslim countries, but during when the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, Pakistan actually supported Kuwait.
Kuwait, yes. Yeah. Why? No, because it was an annexation of a sovereign UN member, my friend. I mean, you cannot allow a state to annex another state and violate its territorial sovereignty. That is a violation of the UN Charter. So that's why we support it.
That is a point. I mean, here it transcends intra-Islamic or intra-Muslim differences.
Exactly.
The extinction of sovereignty by one United Nations member of another is not an acceptable, not acceptable to the what we call the Committee of Nations.
Yeah.
The other thing about Altaf Hussain's extradition, let me just tell you. I mean, unfortunately, coincidentally, the charges that may be brought against Altaf Hussain if he were to brought back to Pakistan would probably carry a death sentence. I mean, I'm not saying he'll be sentenced to death. I mean, he'll probably go to jail for a few years. But it carries a death sentence. So this gives the British legal system the right to deny any extradition proceedings. From the European Union or from Britain, you cannot be extradited on charges which may entail a death sentence. If the prosecutions is carried out. Anyway, so I recognize Dr. Mullen. Rani?
Thank you for your broad overview of Pakistani foreign policy. I would like to take issue with your statement on ISAF forces sitting for 17 years, buying in their commissaries. I've had several former American students who were killed in Afghanistan, one of who was killed by IED, and classified information found that likely support for this traced back to the Haqqani network across the border in Pakistan. So I would, ask you whether, your portrayal of Pakistan as not having supported any non-state actors across the border in Afghanistan, I think is just simply not borne out by some intelligence information. I mean, I think one can have a balanced view that, there were Pakistanis who went back immediately after 9/11 with US support. Planes took Pakistani citizens out of Afghanistan back to Pakistan, as well as a lot of refugees, Afghan refugees in Pakistani camps that have been a source of Taliban recruitment across the border. So I understand that this is problematic for Pakistan, but to say that, or to imply that ISAF's troops have been sitting idly, I think is not quite in line with the facts on the ground. And I would like your comments on Pakistan.
I see your point. Let me explain further. And I had said that I will elaborate what I am saying. That is a generalized statement of the overall picture based on the outcome. The outcome is that they could not eliminate the Taliban, they could not eliminate poppy cultivation, and they could not strengthen the Afghan government that they themselves installed. So it is a broad assessment. Of course there have been casualties, there will be, but not as many as, for example, in Vietnam, for example. Were there as many casualties? No, not as much as in Vietnam. Okay, so the point is that the American presence has not achieved much, and then they blame Pakistan. Now, I did not say that Pakistan does not support supports or does not support. I did not make a categorical statement about these militants and extremists, especially the Taliban. Now, Pakistan is helpless. There was no law and order in northern Waziristan. Pakistan could not take military action in North Waziristan. You see, much of the US intelligence about the links of these people came from Afghan sources. This was admitted by General McChrystal. It was admitted by General Petraeus. The American commanders in ISAF forces have admitted that their sources of information, in their books later on, that their sources of information was generally Afghan intelligence. Now, Afghan intelligence is hostile to Pakistan. You see, the history of Pakistan, Afghanistan needs to be explained in full detail, and there is much more to it than people perceive. Afghans were very unhappy at Pakistan's creation. That was because the Kabul elite was under the influence of the Indian Congress. And this is historical. And to the extent that when Pakistan applied for membership in the UN, the Afghan government was the only government of the world under King Zahir Shah which opposed Pakistan's entry into the UN. They were hostile to Pakistan. They remain hostile. It is their mindset. Then the communist period, the Mujahid-e-Khalq and the Parcham and all, they all had their own pet views of Pakistan, not very favorable. Partly it was ethnic, because many of them were non-Pashtuns. So they have also the intelligence. They broke the news of the death of Mullah Umar just when trilateral talks were going to take place in Murree in 2016. And when talks between US, China, Pakistan and Afghan, Taliban and Afghan government was due to take place in Murree. Just a day before, they announced the death of Mullah Umar, who had been dead for 2 years before that. So, they are hostile to Pakistan. And I don't say that this is very bad or very good. I say this is a factor that figures into this. So it is who is right, who is wrong. You see, in international politics, nobody is entirely right and nobody is entirely wrong. There are all kinds of influences that play along. But Pakistan is seen wrongly as being supportive of the Haqqani and Taliban, Afghan Taliban movement. This is how we are portrayed. It's not correct.
What you said was interesting. Like in international politics, you said there's nothing. In fact, it was Shakespeare who had said that there is nothing good or bad, only thinking makes it so. So there is nothing right or wrong, only thinking makes it so. And everything is done in the pursuit of national self-interest. I will take two questions now with Dr. Rupak Bora and Yasin.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your lecture. I just want to raise a question. You said India is not interested in talks with Pakistan, but what do you make of the recent statement of the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who said, militant organizations are active, call them non-state actors, shall we allow them to cross the border and kill 150 people in Mumbai? So this is a former Pakistani Prime Minister explicitly saying that Pakistan was involved in the Mumbai attacks. And mind you, after Modi took office, he had invited all the SAARC prime ministers for his inauguration, including the former prime minister. He then went to attend Nawaz Sharif's granddaughter's wedding. But soon after, Pathankot happened. So what do you make of it? So it's not as if it's a one-way street.
Then we will have Mr. Yasin.
Yeah,
So
shall I respond?
Respond.
Your comments on this, please.
Yeah. You see, this Mumbai attack is... I am coming to that. Nawaz Sharif, I don't believe Nawaz Sharif, frankly. Because, no, I'll tell you why. Whatever I say, I substantiate it. He owns all these Avonfield house apartments, and he says he doesn't own them. How did he get those apartments, my friend? The people of Pakistan...
4 or 11?
11. No. Yes, but not everybody has been Prime Minister of Pakistan. Now, this guy is a crook and a liar. Okay? That's one thing. And maybe if he comes to office, you never know in politics, I am going to be done for.
Not on top of that.
But anyway, that's my personal opinion as a citizen of Pakistan. I have a right. I have my right to speak and to think as I wish. Now, having said that, Nawaz is doing this in my thinking to, you cut the nose to spite the face. I mean, he's doing it against the army. And he has a running battle going with the army, and it is domestic politics. However, I do not rule out involvement of Pakistani elements in the Mumbai attack. But, we should not be penalized or held hostage to one issue, and that is terrorism. So what happened in Mumbai, we don't know, frankly. I don't know. You won't know. No, the ordinary people would not know. But to put blames and say this is how it was, let him. He said all kinds of things. I don't believe half of it, what he says. Anyway, so this is my answer.
Okay, we've got the point. The final remark from the floor.
I don't have a question, but I just have an observation because of the questions that have been raised, and I speak as a U.S. citizen, okay? As an independent economic man, as a banker.
And also former governor of the bank. Yes. This is a responsibility.
Former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan.
Yes, you cannot evade.
I worked only 7 years in Pakistan for the first time. I worked mostly in Wall Street and U.S. and Europe. I would like to make an observation. In my experience, today, Pakistan is in very good company, along with many other countries, with fake news, okay? And I can cite many, many examples with
fake news.
Fake news. And Pakistan is in very good company, as is France, as is England, as is everybody else, because of President Trump. And you know that. We don't have to go into details. I'll give you an example. You mentioned about January 1st, the tweet from Donald Trump. He went to the same university as I did, but he's much older, so he'd gone by the time I got there.
He went for 1 year, actually.
No, 2 years.
Wharton.
Yeah, he transferred from
Wharton.
Fordham.
You were at Wharton.
Yeah, he transferred from Fordham for the last 2 years during his junior and senior year. So he did graduate from there because that transfer is available. for any university in the United States. But he had left. He's a little older than I am. But he didn't learn some of the coursework that we had common courses on.
Did.
But that's different in terms of protectionism and the tariff. He does not remember the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the 1930s that led to a 64% reduction in world trade, which is what the path is now. But anyway, that's a separate issue. I want to talk about that tweet in 1930s when the Smoot-Hawley tariff came up. Well, that's a separate topic. What I want to mention is about the fake news issues. On January 1st, the tweet that was issued by Donald Trump about $33 billion of aid given to Pakistan with no reciprocity assigned.
Yeah.
Well, that money went through me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I got 2 or 3 calls from different people.
Yeah, as the state bank governor.
To the central bank. 2 or 3 calls from different persons. Yasin, is this true or not? I said, absolutely false. Let me show you the breakdown of how that 33 billion breaks down. $15 billion of that was coalition support funds. Pure reimbursement of expenses that are incurred by the Pakistan forces as agreed between the Pentagon in the United States and the Pakistan forces. 16 billion of that is the fight against narcotics trade. It's all agreed to between the United States and Pakistan. I'm a recipient to that. I discussed this with Richard Holbrooke in my meetings in the State Department and Treasury several times to collect the money because they were always delayed. And I said, give us our money. The Minister of Finance was with me, Hafiz Sheikh, at all times. So 2 billion of that remaining, or 3 billion, was actual aid from 2001 till 17 years. So that aid itself was not distributed properly.
Yeah.
Unlike DFID, where I chaired the committee and channeling the US aid, UK aid, properly through the channels. British aid. US aid, Ambassador Munter used to come and see me, Ambassador Raphael, all these people, I channeled them, advised them how to channel this aid. It wasn't channeled properly. So only $2 to $3 billion was actual aid, not the 33 billion that Trump provided as fake news. I just wanted to highlight that you can't believe everything you read in the papers. The actual facts are very different in what happens in terms of intelligence information or whatever.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to point out.
That's a very good point.
Yes. I just wanted to take advantage of your presence to ask you one question that sometimes we have thought over. In fact, this is the reserves in Pakistan. Now, apparently the current numbers are $10 billion. Now, say Bangladesh reserves would be $31 billion, but I worry about that as well because I'm a conservative in terms of economic this thing. But my point is, you shouldn't have too much reserves either. You shouldn't have anything beyond 3 months import requirements. I think we have gone a little beyond that, but maybe as a buffer that is okay. And I had asked Mr. Sartaj Aziz, and he had said that this is okay for Bangladesh. But Pakistan, $10 billion seems to me a sort of a bad number, so to say, because it doesn't give you more than, or doesn't give Pakistan more than 45 days, really. I had said 2 months in a paper that I had recently written, just published ISAS, but it's only 45 days. Do you think that this is too low, and what can one do to bring it up?
There's a whole separate topic, of course,
that's a separate
discussion.
topic,
I'm a little sensitive to talking about the actual reserves because central bank governors don't like to talk about specific reserves breakdown.
We take advantage of the fact that you are no longer central bank governor.
Well, but I still have to be a little careful because the kind of makeup of that was structured when I was there. In 2013, we had the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
This is the calculation you're talking about.
Yeah, I have the breakdown of that because I worked with this current government as well as the previous governments. And in 2012-13, we had a replica of the situation. I'm saying this openly because Reuters called me and I made this statement. We have a replica today of what stressful situations we faced in 2013, a balance of payments stress with currency pressures as well, because we had a shortfall in the balance of payments and the reserves. I fortunately had a secret weapon up my sleeve with the currency swap agreement that I signed with China. Okay? That was a 10 billion won agreement, which is equal to about 1.5 billion. And we had a current deficit of about 2 billion at the time in 2013. I executed that and brought in $1.5 billion at the time, plus another $500 million from SAFE, which is the People's Bank of China. So we covered that. And in August of 2013, I signed the IMF agreement with 6.7 billion, which helped stabilize the economic situation and restore the stable ratings that Moody's and S&P had identified us with. Since then, it was on an upward trajectory, the reserves. I left in 2014. Now, to build the level of sustainable, and I emphasize the word sustainable reserves, you must have certain economic policies. You cannot use foreign exchange, currency management as a monetary tool. This is sacrosanct, but unfortunately, the people after me did use that. They want a strong currency. Now, in 2014-15, currency appreciated by 10%, from 105, which is what I left it at, to 98. During a period of time when India depreciated by 17%, 21% by Turkey, and other countries too. How can Pakistan appreciate by 10%? It wasn't the crown jewel of an economic country in the world. But that was a different story. Some countries, like the Latin American crisis in the 90s, Latinos like strong currency because it's a sign of masculinity. Okay, so that can be argued that perhaps was the reason. Whatever it is, I'm not an advocate of that. That impaired our ability to develop the sustainable level of reserves that you're alluding to today. We've got a replica of a situation today, albeit slightly higher numbers. That deficit is very, very stressful. It is dangerous. It is not adequate right now. And the makeup of that is something that I won't go into.
Sure.
But yes, there are measures being taken as we speak now to take action to shore up that gap.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
what those measures are,
Okay.
you'll read about them in
Yeah.
the papers in the coming weeks. That I can say publicly, the currency swap agreement has been doubled from
Okay.
10 billion to 20 billion. So that gives you a little bit of lifeline too that they can access. I'll give you some food for thought on that.
Jolly good. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Sarwar, for coming and talking to us, sharing your thoughts, etc., and also leaving your paper with so much of information, details. Thank you for it, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming here, supporting us, and making this this seminar a very lively one, which your remarks and the discussions deserved. And thank you very much also for your input and the input of everyone around this table. Thank you very much. Once again, those of you who would like to have a cup of tea are most welcome to. Those who would not like to have the cup of tea because of the holy month, you're also most welcome to not to. Okay.